This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Dan Krane, professor and forensic scientist, is with us right now, picking up kind of our conversation that we were on yesterday, discussing the case against Kohberger, the DNA, and the 37-day stay that the defense has asked for, now identifying or saying that there were 3 other male DNA samples found on the property. Not many other details beyond that as to placement, where, when, how, all of that. That kind of is important. But, you know, they are doing a job of vigorously defending their client. So you can't really fault them for looking at everything that has come out in evidence and discovery and the affidavits and police reports and try to poke holes. That is their job. And sometimes they do certainly find things that otherwise may have been overlooked. It's always healthy to go through these sort of things, especially before a trial, and try and even out anything that may be amiss or remiss, and make sure that we are dealing in facts, because we're talking about putting someone away in prison for the rest of their lives, or possibly even taking their life. Let's start there, Dan, with the kind of where we left off yesterday.
The issue is how was he first identified as a suspect, not whether or not he matches. I don't think they're at the point yet where they're arguing he doesn't actually match, and maybe they never will be at that point. They're saying we aren't sure how impressed we should be that he matches given the way that he was identified.
Given all that, though, the fact that it does match, correct? I mean, the odds there are pretty good that the DNA on that sheath does match Kohberger. So regardless of the procedures that took place to ascertain that, does that matter? If, 1,000 times you're going to test it, you're going to get the same result. It matches. So are we arguing semantics here on some of this, as opposed to the actual fact of, look, this matches and there really aren't reasonable odds where this could be somebody else?
Well, I think in the end it depends, and I'm not sure that I haven't had an opportunity to look at the DNA test results themselves, mm-hmm. So I don't know. We were talking earlier about how nuclear DNA test results often give rise to numbers in the quintillions.
Yeah, right? Which is what we hear on this case. The investigation found that DNA was 5.37 octillion times. I don't know how many zeros that is, but it sounds like a lot. More likely to be Kohberger's than an unrelated member of the public.
Right. And so, if the numbers were not in the octillions, but if the numbers were in the, let's say, 10,000, mm-hmm. and they searched, they sorted through, they looked at 1,000 people to identify Kohberger, mm-hmm. The similarity of those two numbers, the size of the number of people that they evaluated and the rarity of the DNA test result are sufficiently similar that that ascertainment bias will have a really big impact. Mm-hmm. So instead of 10,000, 1 in 10,000, the number might be more realistically or more appropriately described as 1 in 10.
Okay.
If you're talking about an octillion, right? I know they haven't searched through an octillion individuals in their databases. What'll happen is say they searched 10 million, which is conceivable, mm-hmm. It's plausible. What you need to do is divide that 5 octillion number by 10 million. And you're still going to end up with a really big number. And I think you and I both need to do some homework and figure out how many zeros are in an octillion.
Exactly.
But it's still going to be an impressive number.
Let me ask you we talked about the other DNA that was found on the scene. And again, this was a party house. So I'm curious as to, I would imagine there would be a lot of other DNA found in that house, far more than 2 if they really wanted to find it. Why what would the reason be not to run any DNA that you swab or find in a murder scene? Why would you not run all of it to take a look?
Well, I tell you what, Tony, I'll tell you what I cynically think is the real reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll also tell you what it is that the public version would be. The public version is that when they search the FBI's convicted offender database, any match that is found by statute, by federal statute, must be investigated. Right. And so law enforcement doesn't want to just search any old thing against the CODIS database, because every time they get a report back that there's a hit, they've got to send somebody out to do some kind of investigation, see if the person had an alibi, see if whatever, they need to investigate every hit. And that can be, resource intensive. And so that's the public reason for it. We only want to search things that we think, like a knife sheath, that might be very directly involved with the crime. Cynically, I'll tell you what I think is also percolating in their thoughts is that, we've been dealt a really good hand. We've got a really nice set of facts, and we don't want to muddy the waters with any sort of, random stray other guy who came through this house, right? And I don't want to have the defense in their closing arguments say, oh, it's Bob that was the source of the DNA and Bob's the murderer, not my client, right? And so their cases, they've got a nice set of facts, and they just don't want to mess with them.
Well, I mean, even if they were to test others and determine that they weren't there, or they really have nothing to do with it, you're right. That would simply muddy the waters, not necessarily by any sort of fact, but more so by perception, which could then be twisted and used around in a defense for someone who's basically fighting for their lives.
Yeah. Well, and, in those circumstances, a defense attorney is going to be trying to save their client's life.
Sure.
And there are two ways that they could save their client's life, in some, two different kind of strategies that they may be deploying. One is just make this so costly and difficult to secure a conviction, right? This is going to be a difficult litigation for the government. They may try to make it so difficult a litigation that the prosecutor is going to say, you know what, we'll take the death penalty off the table. How about a plea bargain?
Sure.
Right. So that's part of it. And the other strategy that is consistent and can be done simultaneously is generate things that are going to translate into some reasonable doubt for a jury, so that during the sentencing phase, if you even get to the sentencing phase, the jurors may say, well, I am not just absolutely certain, and so let's just give them life in prison. Right. So that's the goalpost that a defense attorney is going to be, trying to reach in this case.
Yeah. Right now, life is prison is probably almost the goal, probably similar to Daybell, where they did get death taken off the table for Lori, and then just ended up with life in prison. Very interesting cases. Dan, thank you so much for being here. And by the way, octillion is 1 followed by 27 zeros in the U.S. In Great Britain, it's 48 zeros. I guess they have different math.
different potato.
Exactly.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Brueski.